Pop up. Pop up. Well, we're back. And we're gonna continue Saito's route. So let's get to it. April 1867. I don't remember what this is. Is this the... Yes, it is. We're already into skipping territory. We have seen this scene too many times and we shall forever keep seeing it because it exists. Up. Hey, it's a Koudu. Let's go follow them because they look almost like us for some fucking reason. And we have suspicions that they're the one that helped with the Tosa men that were keep wrecking the signboard, notice board. I cracked my back, it hurt. Nokita is slowly dying. Now, I don't know if this changed. We're gonna see, but I'm gonna skip ahead to where we need to be. This guy is a fury and he's after us. He has no struggles with Ashley going ahead and cutting us, and they want blood. I'm not gonna scream again. He's coming for us, and let's see Chikata. All of this is the same. The boys come. They're gonna save us from this fury, and hell has been unleashed. And Ito unfortunately had to discover our secret, and now we're in hot water. Well, we were ordered out of the room. We went to go sleep in Hijikata's room, which is par for the course. Because In real life, Ichikata had so many lovers. God damn it. Anyway, we have our injury. It's healed. It has a tiny scar, but we're gonna pretend we're hurt. And now I gotta voice this one.
あら、あなたは
Ito-san, Miki, and Saito-san and Heisuke. What are you guys doing so early in the morning?
そりゃあれだけのことがあった後、のんびり寝ていられるほど無神経ではありませんわ。雪村くん、怪我をしていたでしょ。傷の様子はどうなのかしら。
Oh, it's not that bad.
そう、それは何よりですわね。
His mood was almost the polar opposite of the previous night. He seemed now to be in rather high spirits. Ito-san, has something happened?
知りたい？教えてあげない。ま、だいたい想像はついてるかもしれないけど。ねえ、東堂くん、斉藤くん。
What? I cocked an eyebrow at Heisuke and Saito-san.
まあな。
The moment our eyes met, he looked away. That seemed odd. Saito-san?
今は知る必要はないということだ。
Unlike his companion, Saito-san met my gaze straight on, but his eyes were flat and utterly devoid of any emotion. It was as if he put up a wall.
なんだ、別れの挨拶にしちゃちとそっけなさすぎないか。それとも実はこんなところからはさっさと出ていきたいってのが本音なのか。
Get out of here?
三郎、余計なことは言わなくてもよろしくてよ。それでは私たちはもう行きますわ。雪村くん、ごきげんよう。
それではな、雪村。
またな。
And then they were gone, leaving me wondering just what had happened.
おや、雪村くん、もう起きてて大丈夫なのかい？
And we can skip this. Let's go on.
あ、こ
いいこのあもあくさあわですおもとこいいし
They're leaving us.
いまか
Alright, so now we got a choice because we're thinking too much about this. I looked up to the sky, watching the clouds form in streaks above me, and then lowered my gaze. It seemed like just yesterday that we were all living our normal lives at the compounds. Then all of a sudden, we'd arrived at today, helpless as our troops split amongst themselves. I couldn't wrap my head around it. However, even with all of my confusion, I was especially worried about the guard. What worried me most were the people leaving with Ito-san. Heisuke and Saito-san. Would I ever get to see them again? Was this goodbye? I wanted to know what they were thinking. Were they still around? As I stood up to go look for them, I spotted Yamazaki walking toward me.
雪村君。
Yamazaki.
昨晩怪我をしたそうだな。傷の具合はどうなんだ？
I'm fine. Have you, seen Heisuke and Saito-san?
東堂さんと斉藤さんか。
His expression turned grim at the mention of their names. It was quite clear how he felt about the men who'd chosen to leave the Shinsengumi with Ito-san. Sorry for asking. I turned quickly to leave, but he held out a hand to stop me.
境内だ。向こうに行くのをさっき見かけた。
Thanks.
話をするなら早い方がいい。彼らがここを出た後はそれすらも許されなくなるからな。
うん。There they were. Heisuke! Saito-san! They turned around with reserved expressions.
やっぱ捕まっちまったか。
Oh, did you want to be left alone? I can go.
んなことないって。俺もちゃんと話したいって思ってたからさ。
Good.
やはり来たか。話があるなら早く済ませてくれ。
Right. I just wanted to hear it from you. Why are you leaving the Shinsengumi?
理由か。
He scrunched up his face and scratched nervously at the side of his nose.
伊藤さんは同じ流派の先輩だし、昔から知ってるしさ。あの人が新選組に入ったのは、俺が誘ったのがきっかけだったんだし。だから、一緒に行動する義務があるんじゃねえかなって。そう思ったんだよ。
Heisuke had always struck me as kind, so it was no surprise that he felt he couldn't abandon Ito-san. But that means But that means you'll leave everyone else behind. You might not ever get to see them again.
いきなり分派って言われて、俺もちょっと動揺してるところはあるんだけどさ。けど俺、もともと幕府に尽くしたいって思ってたわけじゃねえし、例の薬のこととかいろいろ考えると、伊藤さんが言う御領絵師の方が合ってる気がするんだ。
I couldn't really think of anything to say, so I kept my mouth shut. After a moment, he continued.
俺だって本当はみんなとずっとバカ騒ぎしてたかったさ。だって江戸にいた頃から今までずっと一緒だったもんな。
His gaze drifted off into the distance, and his profile seemed almost heartbreakingly lonely. His mouth was a hard line. His mind was made up. What about you, Saito-san? I looked up at him.
自らの志に合うと感じて、伊藤派に属することに決めた。
Are you an imperialist too?
征夷大将軍というのは本来、夷敵を排するためにある役職。害意を払うという本分を忘れた幕府に尽くす道理はあるまい。
So you're saying that Kondo-san and Hijikata-san are wrong?
そうだ。
And because you don't agree with them, you're willing to walk away and never see them again?
それもやむを得んだろう。己の志を貫くためには、情などに頓着するべきではない。
But I felt betrayed. How could you do this to us? We've been together for so long. And now you're just going to abandon us?
そう言うなよ。こっちもつれえんだからさ。
The look he gave me nearly broke my heart, and in that moment I suddenly understood how he felt. He was suffering too, perhaps just as much as I was, and yet I'd said such horrible things.
いや、こっちこそごめんな。じゃあな。
And then he was gone, and I was left with my apology still forming on my lips. Heisuke, How could I have been so inconsiderate? I should have known that it was painful for him too.
ずっと共に頑張ってきたから、これから先も一緒にか。あんたは己の志にそぐわなくとも、長い間一緒にいたというだけで、今後も行動を共にし続けるべきだというのか。情に流されて己のなすべきことを見失う。それでは本末転倒だろう。
But you can ignore your feelings so easily? Let me say that again because I read it wrong. Blah, blah. But can you ignore your feelings so easily? Isn't it hard for you to leave your friends behind?
しない。
Ow.
勤めであれば仲間であろうと切る。そう決めれば迷うこともない。
I don't think I could ever understand that. Duty is important to you, I know, but still, was duty the only function of a member of the Shinsengumi? Did they exist only to fulfill that duty, at the exclusion of everything else? That seemed awfully, horribly sad. I wanted to speak, to tell Saito-san how I felt, but I knew that no matter what I said, it would simply slide off of him, unacknowledged and unwelcome. Saito-san, for his part, said nothing. We stood for a moment until he moved towards one of the many blossoming cherry trees covering the temple grounds. Cherry blossoms? It must have been my imagination, but I could have sworn that Saito-san's face, as he looked at the blossoms above him, was sad.
時が移ろう中で、さまざまなものが変わっていく。世の動きも思想も、そしてこの新選組も。
He reached out gently and let a single petal fall into his palm. For several moments, he simply looked at it. Are we changing too? He looked up. Our eyes met. We have. Is that why you're leaving? Because we've changed? He didn't answer, only gazed quietly up at the cherry blossoms. His mind had been made up long ago. There was nothing I could say that would change it now.
それでも、何もかもが変わってしまうわけではない。
I was surprised, not by his words, but by the small smile that appeared with them.
時代の移り変わりとともに変わるものもあれば、変わらぬものもある。そして俺は、変わらぬものをこそ信じている。
Things that do not change.
そう。変わらぬものだ。
And somehow, that meant he should go with Ito-san? It didn't make any sense. What Saito-san believed in was something else. I didn't know what yet, but I could feel it. So long as he didn't change, so long as he was still the man who could look at cherry blossoms and smile, then perhaps it was okay. Even if he was far away, perhaps our hearts could still feel the presence of the other. It was sad to think that he would no longer be nearby, but... Saito-san, could you give me that pedal?
別に構わないが、どうするつもりなのだ、こんなもの。
I won't do anything with it. I just want to keep it. A reminder of my time with him.
あんたは物好きだな。だがいいだろう。ほら。
Thank you. I'll treasure it. My wound healed completely soon afterwards, but I kept the bandages on. Ah! I'm sorry. Flower petal! Flower petal! I didn't want anyone to see that my scar had healed. Since Ito-san, Heisuke, and Sato-san all left, the compounds felt so much larger and emptier. And Takada also left, and we can skip all this, oh god. Which should lead us to... yeah, it should lead us to 3 months later. Yep. And we've been through all of this. We can skim through all of this. Just Sen filling us in on everything. That we're a demon. She's a demon. Kimigiku, Kazuma, and his cronies, as the game says. And she kind of wants to take us away from the Shinsengumi because she has absolutely no faith in the Shinsengumi to protect us. But ultimately, we get to stay either way. Da 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 da. Pressing. Press button. Button. Sana-san is still looking for a fight though, by the way. I know this part way too fucking well. Alright, now we get to be alone with Sen and make our choice. Anyway. We tell her yes. And we continue on with the skipping. But we get to live here with them, so... And now I get to do this. Once again, sleep refused to come. My mind worked furiously, turning over everything Sen had told me, examining it from every angle. I was a demon. Not only that, but I was the head of a pure-blooded demon clan that was nearly destroyed, my heritage being the reason for Cosmo's continued interest. Gosh. I had decided to stay with the Shinsengumi, but was that really the best idea? Should I have left instead? I'd wanted to stay, of course, and I didn't really think leaving was a reasonable choice, but... what if I'd made a mistake? I heard a sound from outside and it made me jump. That sound... could it be? I heard Shimada from the hallway. Yes? The door snapped open as Shimada stepped in. His eyes darted back and forth nervously and his body was tense. Has something happened? What? But... I was the reason they'd come here. How could I justify sitting on my hands while others fought my battles for me? I didn't know what to do. Well, the guy does, and it says, go outside. They're after me. If I go outside of the compounds, Then I won't cause any more trouble to everyone.
そんなこと、誰も迷惑などとは思っていません。
If they find out that I'm not here anymore, they may leave.
それは確かにそういう手もあるかもしれませんが。では、行くなら俺も共に行きます。
Alright. Shimada and I left my room, attempting to leave the compounds from the back. Suddenly, I thought I saw something fly past me. Then, it seems like Shimada noticed it too. Then, once more, his large body was flung high through the air. Poor Shimada, every time something happens to Shimada, I just feel bad. Shimada's body was smashed against the wall. Shimada! I tried to run up to him, but then...
しばらく目を覚まさないでしょう。
Oh, are we doing... Oh, I see. Okay, I know what we're doing then.
君は私と共に来てもらいます。本意ではありませんが、これ以上お遊びに時間を割きたくはないもので。
I tried to escape, but it was...
無駄なことを。
He came from behind and bound my hands before putting his hands over my mouth. I desperately tried to shake him off, but he held me down with all of his weight and power, so I couldn't even budge. Where was he taking me? He moved unhindered to the back entrance. The rest of the Shinsengumi had been drawn off by the commotion elsewhere. I could hear the clang of swords from somewhere nearby, but I couldn't see anything. Perhaps if I cried out. Hijikata-san and the men may hear me, but since he was covering my mouth, I wasn't even able to scream.
おとなしくしていてください。そうすれば。 もう誰も傷つけずに済みます。我々の目的は君を捕らえることであって、誰かを傷つけることではないのですから。
I saw Shimada's limp body, crumpled at the base of the pillar, and bit my lip. What should I do? Stay quiet, apparently. If I resisted, the Shinsengumi would suffer. But if Amagiri was telling the truth, then all I had to do was keep quiet and they'd be safe. We left the Nishi-Howanji temple and shot out into the back streets of Kyo. He ran so fast I almost felt as if we were flying. His hold on me had never relaxed, but he was moving faster than I'd ever seen anyone go. Not only were demons strong, it seemed they had other powers we'd yet to see. I shuddered. For now, it was probably best that I stayed quiet. I didn't know where he was taking me, but perhaps I could learn something about them if I did as he asked. My goal would be to gather information, and then look for a chance to escape. I was trying to guess where we might be going when Amagiri suddenly stopped. What's wrong? I didn't know what happened.
このままかけていたら、足を切り落とされかねなかったので。
What? Before I had a chance to ponder what he'd meant, Amagiri called out to the darkness.
そろそろ顔を出してはいかがです?
After a moment, I saw a shape move in the shadows. It stepped forward into the light, revealing... Saito-san? I don't believe it. I haven't seen him once ever since he had left the Shinsengumi.
こんなところで会うとは意外だな。
通していただけませんか。急いでいましてね。
何故あんたがその娘を連れている。さしずめ頓傷を荒らした上、新選組と関わりがある者を連れ去ったといったところか。このまま見過ごすわけにはいかんな。
He's expressionless as always. But his eyes seemed like he showed signs of concern towards me. I wonder if I imagined it.
どういう風の吹き回しです。君はもはや新選組とは関わりがないと聞いていましたが。
俺が新選組に属しているか否かは今は関係ない。問題は貴様がその娘を連れているということだ。同意の上で連れ出したわけではあるまい。
もしそうだとしたらどうするつもりなのです。
問答無用だ。行くぞ。
The final word became a sudden yell, and Saito-san launched himself towards Amagiri, his sword springing from its scabbard. The momentum of his charge drove the blade into a sideways slash, and I heard the hiss of a sword. Did I just do the thing twice? And I heard the hiss of a sword pass inches from my ear. Amagiri saw Saito's blade and dodged it. I could hear the wind from the blade pass my ears. Why are we saying this again?
なるほど、早い。人の技とは思えぬ腕前だ。
その娘を抱えたままやり合うつもりか。あんたたちはその娘に死なれては困るのではないか。
True, if Amagiri hadn't dodged that last strike, I would have been split nearly in two.
俺はその娘が死んだところで困らん。新選組とは関わりのない身ゆえな。
Although it sounded cold, I could sense that he didn't truly mean it. Because if he truly didn't care if I died or not, he wouldn't have needed to get in the way of Amagiri. Suddenly, the weight of Amagiri's grip was gone.
いいでしょう。今夜は君の策に乗って引き下がることとしましょう。
And with that, Amagiri was gone. Another shadow in a night full of them.
怪我はないか。
When he asked me, I finally got a grip of myself. I'm alright. Thank you, Saito-san.
礼には及ばん。雪がかり上、助けたに過ぎんからな。
Would he have really killed me if Amagiri had refused to back down? It didn't seem very likely to me, but there was no way to know for sure without asking him. Then again, asking him wouldn't help either. I doubted he would give me a straight answer if I did.
何がおかしい？
なんでもない。None of that, however, answered the question that had abruptly forced itself into my mind. What was Saito-san doing here? Or what was Saito-san doing there? Are you... Perhaps this was more of a convenient imagination on my end. Going to come back to the Shinsengumi?
勘違いするな。たまたま通りがかっただけだ。
Passing through the back streets of Kyoto in the middle of the night? The only place he could have been going was the temple.
そんなことより、御陵エジと新選組が関わるのはご法度だろう。 誰かに見られると面倒だ。もう行け。
But I'm not actually part of the Shinsengumi. The expression of Saito-san's face wasn't one I'd seen before. On another person, I might have called it surprised. Surprise.
うまい方便を考えつくものだな。それが副長に通じるのかどうかはともかく。
Yeah, he had a point. Hijikata-san would almost certainly take a much stricter view of the situation.
どうした？何を笑っている？
Nandemonai. He's just called Hijikata-san Commander, Saito-san.
単に言い間違えただけだ。そう呼んでいた時期が長かったからな。もう行け。いつまでもここにいると不定老師に襲われかねんぞ。
But, Saito-san...
あんたが行かぬというのなら俺が行く。鬼の気配も消えたようだから一人でも帰れるだろう。
Oh. And he was gone. I know Saito-san was saying all that, but maybe his heart was still with the Shinsengumi. Although Saito-san didn't specifically say so. For some reason, I was sure of it. After time passed to the following day, we were being kicked out of the temple. Basically suggested, and poor Shimada. I shall drink some water. Oh, I think I know what's gonna be up next. October 1867. Half a year had passed since Ito's departure. With 6 months to build, my anxiety had finally moved from mental to physical and given me a cold. Yes! We're getting this scene. I'm so happy. I was cleaning up after lunch, and as I was putting away the dishes...
おい、顔色があんまり良くねえみてえだが、風邪でもひいてんのか?
What? No. No, I'm fine.
何言ってんだよ、サナ。いつも元気な彼女が風邪なんてひくはずねえじゃねえか。なあ。
新八。風の方から裸足で逃げ出しそうなお前とこいつを一緒にすんなって。
Obnoxious idiot! Alright.
禅は俺たちで片付けておいてやるから、お前は部屋で休んだろ。
Really, I'm okay.
原田の言う通りだ。そんな熱っぽい顔してんのに、雑用なんてさせられるはずねえだろう。今日はおとなしく部屋で休んどけ。わかったな。
I certainly wasn't about to argue with Hijikata-san. Nope, no arguments from him. Nuh-uh, we can't. It's forbidden. Hi, I guess I'll let you finish up. I thanked them and scurried back to my room. Normally, I rarely took ill, so I hoped my fever would go down quickly, but... Unfortunately, it did the opposite. Even laying down, I began to feel increasingly woozy. My father had always said that I was more resilient than most people. Surely a good long nap would cure it. But the sun went down and night came, and my fever still refused to break. I was alternately shivering and sweating, and a dull headache throbbed at the inside of my skull. After a while, I began to realize I was thirsty. Then, perhaps, the fever was finally breaking. I began to feel nauseous. But I felt something cold touch my forehead. Had one of the warriors come to check up on me? I opened my eyes and struggled to focus them on the person in front of me. It was... I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was no way he could be there. No way. Was I dreaming? I was too feverish to be sure whether what I was seeing was reality or just an illusion. A part of me worried that if I spoke, the dream would shatter and he would disappear. But I had to know. Saito-san... He didn't respond. Instead, he glared down at me. What was happening? I tried to climb up out of my bed, but...
起き上がるな。熱が上がったらどうする?
His voice was barely above a whisper, but I could hear steel in it. So, I did as I was told and dropped my head back onto my pillow. Is that really you, Saito-san?
他の誰に見えるというのだ?
He lifted the now warm towel from my forehead, submerged it in a bucket of ice water, and then carefully reapplied it.
たちの悪い風にかかったか。ひどい熱だな。
Oh, I'm fine. I just need to sleep.
己の技量を過信しすぎるなと、あんたの師匠は教えなかったのか?
What?
どれほどの達人でも、ひとたび油断すれば、自分より数段格下の相手に敗れてしまうことがある。今のあんたも同じだ。自分の体を過信するな。
I wasn't in any condition to argue, so I kept my mouth closed and pulled my blanket up a little higher. Silence hung in the chilly air. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't think of what or when. But there was something comforting about the silence, and I hadn't felt that way in a long time. I looked over at Saito-san. No.
なんだ?
Sorry for making you worry. I'm sorry for making you worry about me.
そのセリフは俺よりも副長や他の皆に言ってくれ。局長も副長も宗司も新八も佐野もあんたのことを心配しているはずだ。
As he spoke, he picked the warm cloth up off my forehead. Quietly and carefully, he chilled it in the water, then put it back. He still put the feelings of others before his own. Whatever else might have changed, Saito-san hadn't. It felt as if things had gone back to the way they'd been. I think this is a dream after all.
何故そう思う?
Because you left the Shinsengumi. But now you're in my room, talking about how I should worry about Hijikata-san. That can't be real, so this has to be a dream. Suddenly, he looked very tired. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then shut it again. It's a nice dream. I wish you would really come back, though.
何故嬉しいのだ。あんたの言っていることはよくわからん。
Of course I'd be happy. I wanted to see you really bad. I smiled at him through my fever, but his face remained impassive. Not that I would have expected a reaction from Saito-san. In a way, it made me happy. It was just the sort of thing he'd do, and it warmed my heart.
今夜は無理をせず、ゆっくり寝ておけ。明日も熱が下がらなかったら、副長に頼んで医者を呼んでもらうといい。
But if I fall asleep now, then I'll stop dreaming, and I'll miss you. For a moment, I thought I saw him blush, but then again, this was a dream. Maybe he did blush. After a moment, he reached out one of his hands.
雪村、手を貸せ。あんたが寝つくまで手を握っていよう。少しくらいは不安が紛れるだろう。
Are you sure?
いらぬと言うならやめておくが。
No, of course I do. I worked my weak, shaking hand out from under my blankets and took his. His skin felt cool and smooth, but strong, like very fine leather. Through the fever haze, I remember the moment our hands had touched when I handed him the snow bunny I'd made. Your hand feels cool.
あんたの手が熱いせいだ。熱があるからな。
ごめんね。
別に叱ったわけではない。風邪をひくことくらい誰にでもある。何でも自分のせいだと思い込むのはあんたの悪い癖だ。
わかった。Even being admonished felt comforting and nostalgic. Aren't you worried I might give you my cold?
朝までのほんの短い時間だ。移ったりはするまい。
What does morning have to do with it, Saito? I felt relieved, but also sad. After all, it was a dream. When I woke up, Saito-san would be gone.
もう寝ろ。蘭方医の娘ならば、風邪には休養が一番だと知っているはずだろう。
I let my eyes drift closed. My fever hadn't been pleasant, but at least it had given me a nice dream to remember. I only regretted that it had been just a dream. If only... I like this trope too much! I need more of it! Give me more fever tropes! Either way, either your character is sick or your partner is sick. Give me more of these. I live by them. It may be a cliche, but they are worth it! Alright. I woke the next morning to the sound of birds chirping. My fever seemed to have broken during the night, and although my body was exhausted, I was no longer ill. I sat up slowly, and just as I'd expected, Saito-san was nowhere to be seen. Silently, I sighed. It had just been a dream. If only it could have lasted a little longer. In the corner of my room was a bucket of water, just like the one I'd seen in my dream. Saito-san had used it to cool my towel. But that couldn't be right. Could it? He's left the Shinsengumi. Surely he wouldn't risk coming back just to tend to me when I was sick. Give me more of that trope. Anyway, November! November 1867. We can skip. Ba, 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 ba. And we can all skip through this.
本当かよ。
Wait.
一体誰がやったんだ?
Yeah, we can skip. I don't think anything changes in the scene, even if Saito is in it.
What the?
Hi, Saito. Yeah, nothing changes really. Saito's here and it's giving us information about Ito and the Imperial Tombs and all that stuff. And eventually we sort of have a fight with Hijikata, just a little bit. But yeah, we gotta kill Ito. Ito's now gonna be assassinated. We gotta save Heisuke, but we're fighting Hijikata on this. Anyway. So I decided to stay home. I understand. I will stay behind. That's right. There's a chance that we may have to fight Heisuke. Would I be of any use if and when that were to happen? The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't bear to be a burden to anyone. After I saw everyone off, I sighed. As my breath blew white, I looked up to the sky. The moon was a full circle watching silently. They would all be going to battle. If I went, I would only be in the way. Or perhaps that was simply an excuse to allow myself to feel better for staying behind because I didn't know what to say to Heisuke. Harada and Nagakura are his best friends. If anyone can bring him back, they can. My mind occupied with worried thoughts of Heisuke and the others, I wandered around the compound and before long found myself outside. I was about to go back in when I heard footsteps running toward me. Yamazaki-san?
こんなところで何をしている? 一人で出歩かないよう言われているはずだが。
Oh, sorry.
いや、今はそんなことはどうでもいい。大変な知らせが入った。 時間が惜しい。広間に人を集めるから手伝ってくれ。
Serious? The main hall was noisy, even though most of the Shinsengumi was elsewhere.
掃除は休んでいるようだったから呼ばなかったよ。構わないかい？
はい、問題ありません。それより、ことは急を要します。島田君たちがまだですが、先に話しましょう。
Has something happened? I've never seen Yamazaki-san so impatient. Whatever it was that he had to say, it had to be big. He was making me nervous. I waited for Yamazaki to continue.
もしや伊藤さんの暗殺に失敗したのかい？
いえ、それ自体は成功です。我々は伊藤の死体をおとりに五両エジを油麹へとおびき寄せ包囲しました。
So few words to mark the death of a man. But Yamazaki-san pressed forward, and I had no time left to feel sad.
ですがその際、長倉さんたちと五両エジ双方を包囲する形で横槍が入りました。おそらく薩摩の連中です。
Oh no! Are Nagakura, Harada, and Heisuke all right?
敵の数はこちらを大きく上回っていたが、おそらくあの方々ならばしばらくは持ちこたえてくれるはずだ。
早急に援軍を送らなければならないね。動ける者は私と島田君と。
Just as Inoue stood up, there was an explosion of noise from outside. What was that noise? Shocked glances were exchanged just as Shimada came through the door, distress plain on his face.
大変です。鬼が襲撃してきました。
What? Why now?
こんな時だからかもしれないね。状況を説明してくれ、島田君。襲ってきたのは例の3人組かい？
いえ、刀を持った細表の男一人です。確かあれは
刀？風間千景か。
We ran through the door, then came to a sudden halt, frozen by the scene before us. Everywhere there were bodies, and the air was thick with the stench of blood. The scent was so strong that one The scent was so strong that one not need to be a fury to be driven mad by it. Ugh.
このムクロは皆羅刹隊。これを風間が一人でやったと。
羅刹隊ということは、撃って出たのは三男さんか。彼は今どこに？
あちらです。
まがいものの力など所詮はこの程度。哀れなものだな。生まれ変わって出直してくるがいい。
One of the Furies who had leapt at Kazuma alongside Sanan-san fell to the ground with a groan.
貴様は他の雑魚よりは多少はマシだが、所詮はまがいものの剣に過ぎぬ。
Of all the Fury Corps, Sanan-san was the only one who could even begin to stand before Kazuma's onslaught. But even he was no match for the demon. Kazuma kicked out almost casually at a charging Fury, throwing him across the yard and continued his slow walk forward.
雪村君、君は下がっていろ。あいつは我々が抑える。
But
敵は風間だけではない。いつ仲間が駆けつけてこないとも限らないからね。それに羅刹が分別をなくして襲いかかってくる降参も高い。
the two eventually nodded to one another and ran off, sword in hand.
雪村君、中に隠れていてください。風間は我々が追い払います。
Ay. Shimada ran and off. Wait, what? Shimada ran and went off to back up Sanan-san and Inoue. I didn't know why Kazuma had chosen this time to attack. But even if I faced him, I would be completely useless. What then was I to do? I'll go find Saito-san! If Inoue and the others were here, and Okita was in bed, there was still one more man unaccounted for who might be able to help. I'd only run a short distance when I collided with someone. Saito-san... No, you're... The man I'd hit was a fury, mad with bloodlust. I scrambled back just as a voice called out from the darkness behind me.
Atama wo sagero!
Saito-san! As I threw myself to the ground, it occurred to me that it was slightly ironic to have been saved by the man I'd gone to find. When I turned, he was studying the fallen fury, his mouth a thin line.
羅刹隊の暴走が始まったか。厄介なことになったな。
Saito-san! Kazuma's here! Inoue's fighting him with some of the other men, but...
そうか。奴はどこにいる?
Oh, over here! My legs were shaking so bad I couldn't move. Whether it was because of the fury who'd attacked me or the thought of facing Kazuma again, or relief at seeing Saito-san, I couldn't say. He looked down at me, shivering on the floor, and his voice was cool and calm.
安心しろ。守れという命令がある限り、俺はあんたを守り抜く。たとえ何があってもだ。
My body stilted. Or stilled, not stilted, stilled. Saito-san was a man of few words, and when he did speak, it was never unnecessarily. But he had taken the time to comfort me. That meant he... Thank you.
時間がない。さっさと行くぞ。
When we returned to the battlefield, I'd left only moments ago. Kazuma was still engaged.
おのれ。
島田君、前に出るな。一人でも切られれば総崩れになる。
Sweat shone on their brows, and their chests heaved as each of them struggled for breath. Kazuma looked almost completely unfazed. He had killed countless furies, fought the standstill, and not suffered even a single scratch. Inoue!
雪村君、斉藤君を呼んできてくれたか。
怪我をした者がいれば下がれ。あとは俺が何とかする。
ほう。歯ごたえのない連中ばかりで退屈していたところだった。貴様が残っていた。
Oh, great.
俺が来た以上好きにはさせん。などと言うつもりはないが。これでも豚書の留守を任された一人なのでな。
His body lowered into a crouch, and his hand reached for his sword. He was preparing for AI. Instead of entering a stance of his own, Kazuma looked at Saito-san for a moment, then sheathed his own sword and slowly backed away.
逃げる気か。
今日はただの時間稼ぎだ。
Great.
俺個人の用向きで来たわけではないので。長居をするつもりはない。
His eyes slid to me and he smirked.
覚えておくのだな。これがまがい者の末路だ。
His cool gaze fell on the corpses of the Furies.
血に狂い、仲間を襲う存在となり果て、それでも我ら本物にはかなうことなく、犬のように切られる運命の哀れな道化。このような輩に囲まれて暮らすなら、 俺と共に来た方が幸せだと思うが。
No, I'll never do that! He flashed his teeth with a grin, then turned on his heel and melted into the darkness.
引いたようだな。無事か、雪村。
But only because you protected me.
そうか。
I couldn't shake what Kazuma had said. Scattered atop the floor were the brutally slain remains of the Furies.
井上さん、悪い知らせです。ここで対応しきれなかった羅刹が数名、屯所の中に侵入していたようです。
なんだって、中の被害はどうなっているんだい？
警備です。侵入した羅刹は切り殺されていました。
誰がやった？今屯所の中には羅刹と戦えるほどのものは残っていないはずだが。
沖田さんです。俺が沖田さんの部屋に入った時、無数の羅刹の死体が転がっていました。
What? But I thought Okita was too sick to fight.
だからすぐに松本先生を呼びに行くんだ。
I'll go with you. The attack on the Watch, as well as the assassination of Ito-san, later became known collectively as the Aburo no Koji incident. An unexpected turn from both the demons and the Satsuma from their trap laying resulted in a number of casualties for the Shinsengumi and the Watch, including Heisuke's fatal wound. In order for Heisuke to live, he had no choice but to drink the water of life. While this was all going on, Chikage Kazuma took the time to strike at the heart of our compounds. The serum brought into the Shinsengumi by my father was now slowly eating all of them away. My heart began sinking from the weight of all this. We can skip this because this is a scene with Sun on Sun again. We gotta get to the choice. Hey Hijikazu, you're a savior, god fucking damn. Anyway. There were so many warriors who were injured as a result of the attack on the compounds. Sato-san had been present for long recently, and Kondo-san was occupied with his meeting with the Bakushin. Similarly, I had a feeling Hijikata-san was feeling the pressure of all of his duties lately. I wish that I could be helping him in some capacity, but I might get in their way. I wanna help. Is there anything I could help you guys with? It could be anything. Please, just let me help. He followed his response with a sour expression that intimidated me. Well... Had he become upset by my question? Perhaps I shouldn't have said anything at all. No. If I back down now, nothing will change. Please, it could be anything small. The silence stretched out so long, I thought I was going to scream. Huh? Huh?
筆と紙を持ってこいっつってんだ。お前の部屋にはそんなものもねえのか。
Right away. I scrambled across the room, grabbed a brush and paper, and handed them to Hijikata-san. He then took them silently, still scowling, and quickly began to draw. A map? What is that? He ignored me and continued drawing.
斎藤が三浦の警護で天満屋に詰めてるのは知ってるな。あいつに渡してほしいものがある。届けてきてくれ。
Do you think I can?
なあ、大使に行かせると目立っちまってしょうがねえからな。お前なら怪しまれることはまずねえだろう。任せて大丈夫だな。
Of course. Sir. I was thrilled to help, of course, but I was even more ecstatic to be given a task especially suited to me. However, that does put a lot of pressure on me.
こいつが地図だ。これを見ながら行きゃ迷子にはならねえだろう。
Thank you. The map was pretty straightforward, but I still barely knew my way around Kyo. Without it, I likely would have gotten lost. Alright, I'm going. I turned to leave, and only a concerted effort kept me from skipping towards the door.
おい、手ぶらで行ってどうするんだよ。届け物だっつっただろうが。
Sorry, I got carried away.
たく、久々の外出だからって浮かれすぎだぜ。そんな調子で大丈夫なのか。
Of course, I'll do a great job.
これが斎藤に渡す書状だ。浮かれて落としたりするなよ。
I'll be very careful. Is there anything you want me to tell him?
特にね、必要なことは全部書状に書いてある。
Understood. Then I'm off. This time I wasn't able to fully subdue the urge to skip. But even as I hurry, I have to be careful. Still, I wonder if it was really okay for him to trust me with all of this. We trust Hijikata-san. No, Hijikata-san trusted me to do this. I need to fulfill the task given to me. Keeping this in mind, I decided I was prepared for the mission, and I left to deliver Saito-san's letter. First, I slipped the letter into... Oh my god, it's a Dan! What is that? Why is there a bean? Bean. First, I slipped the letter into my kimono, and I double-checked to make sure it wouldn't fall out. Next, I carefully unfolded the mat Hijikata-san had drawn out for me. Hijikata-san placed enough faith in me to get the job done, so I had to be sure I did things correctly. Things are going fine! We're almost done with one chapter. I think this is the last part, actually. And then we can go on to chapter 5. Okay, so I go this way on this street. According to this map, it looks like I have a long way to go. I better hurry or it's going to be evening by the time I get there. Maybe I should run there. Well, after chapter 5, we go on to do Edo Blossom with Saito. And then we do Harada, then Chizuru's. And I purposely left Yamazaki last because he's my best boy. And then we get to speedrun all of the death scenes. The game overs and the unrequited love scenes. So like 3 more. I wanted to ensure I take all safety precautions, of course, but I was overwhelmed with a sense of duty to the point that I couldn't help but feel running would ensure I'd complete the task on time. Yeah. And then, off stream, I gotta finish the jank version of this. I think this is the place? Yeah, the jank version. I don't even know if the way that I have it, if the DLC portion works. But we'll see. If not, I definitely had to get my PS3 cleaned so that I can figure out how the hell to record from it and get the DLC. I checked the house number etched into the lantern that was posted in front of the building. I was sure I had arrived at the correct location. I'd been told earlier that Saito had taken a room under the name Yamaguchi. Excuse me? I have business with the person who is staying here. After speaking with the clerk, Saito-san came out shortly after. I mean, Yamaguchi, sorry to bother you.
Yukimura? あんたが来たのか?
One of his eyebrows shifted up fractionally. Fractionally? In response to my presence. Clearly he seemed surprised. I'm sorry you got someone as inexperienced as me.
いや、そんなことはない。少し意外に思っただけだ。そろそろ連絡がある頃合いだとは思っていたが。
What? That's an interesting thing. Why? But why? Okay, that's interesting. Why?
副長があんたを使いによこすとはな。
Right. Well, I asked if there was anything I could do to help, and he was kind enough to let me help like this today. Oh boy, send them on the server.
だが妙案だ。
It is?
俺の顔を知っている他の大使を使いによこせば、この場所を知られてしまう。かといって昨日今日入ったような新参の大使をよこすわけにもいかん。どこかの患者かもしれんからな。疑われることなく使いに出せて、どこの息もかかっていない人間。さすが副長だ。これ以上の人選はありえん。
Saito-san's explanation made me realize how much Hijikata-san had thought this plan through. After I made the request to help him, he had considered all of this and gave me the order. Hijikata-san truly has a brilliant mind.
では書状を。
That's a line, Dan. Oh, of course. I pulled out the letter and handed it over. He tore it open and read it over quickly, then lit it on a nearby lantern and watched patiently until it was nothing more than ash. Saito-san?
Yamaguchi だ。
Right, Yamaguchi. Are you sure it was okay to burn it? I guess that's true.
もう目は通した。
I appreciate the example.
こんなものをいつまでも残しておくと誰かに読まれぬとも限らん。
Oh, of course.
役目ご苦労だったな。感謝する。
Oh, well, just doing my job. No need for thanks. I certainly hadn't done anything very impressive, because anyone could have done it, but it did feel nice to be thanked. I was useful to everyone. Now that the job was done, though, I wasn't quite sure what I should do next. Stay and talk! Saito-san had been ordered away from the Shinsengumi for the duration of his assignment. This was the first time I'd been able to see him in a while, and there was no way to know when he'd return. The fact that I didn't know when I might see him again made me reluctant to turn around and leave. Saito-san. Oh god, there's a Half-Life one! Oh, fuck yeah! Half-Life. I know too much Half-Life lore, having played none of the games. I'd like to stay and talk for a bit, if that's okay with you.
俺と話を。
うん。
あんたが喜ぶような話をしてやれるとは思えんが。
Oh, no need. Just a normal conversation is fine. Or even just being by my side is enough. Saito-san stared at me for a while, but eventually...
まあいいだろう。場所を変えるぞ。
Hmm? I opened my mouth to ask, but he was already walking away. Quickly, I jogged to catch up. Yamaguchi, please wait! I rushed to follow him. Ooh, 25 minutes. We reached a small back street and he stopped. Looking back, I could still see Tenma, but there weren't many people about and the streetlights didn't reach us. Standing in such a narrow street forced us into somewhat closer quarters than normal. Why are we out here?
俺の役目はいつ誰に狙われるかわからぬ三浦の護衛だ。副長が人目につかぬよう、大使ではなくあんたを使いによこしてくださったのに。老師たちに顔を知られている俺が目立つわけにはいかぬからな。
That's true. Sorry, I didn't think of that.
構わん。あんたが気づかなくとも俺が気づいたのだからな。適材適所というものだ。人にはそれぞれ己を生かす場というものがある。
Right. Saito-san is always so matter-of-fact. I heard that he was around the same age as Okita Heisuke, but he's actually around the same age as the both of them. Thank you, history, for telling us that. See, Saito is actually very young, but he's very mature. Why is he so mature? It's so weird.
Yukimura.
What is it?
豚書の様子はどうだ？変わったことはないか？
Well, everyone's been busy lately, after all that happened. I guess things are pretty restless right now.
それも当然か。事件がなかったとしても、大使の数が相当減ってしまっているのだからな。
Alright. Bye, Dan. Thank you for sharing what you sent on the server. I'll look at it later. Ugh. Our conversation stopped again. I blew into my hands since they were so cold to the point of pain.
冷えるか。ならばそろそろ戻った方がいいのではないか。
I'm fine. I want a little more time.
だが。
I don't get to go out like this so often. Oh, but if you want to go back to your room, then... That's also a mistake. This is still Chizuru talking, not Saito.
いや、俺の方は構わん。
Saito-san's curt words made me feel relieved. There's no way he wasn't cold under this harsh weather, but... I guess he's been considerate for me, who never gets to go out often. Saito-san eventually spoke up again.
平助の様子はどうだ？
I'd expected him to ask eventually. What man in his position wouldn't have been concerned for his friend? Well, as far as I can tell, he's still the same person he was before. I mean, he's a little different, just because he can't be up and about during the day. But I was about to say I don't know what would come of him if I caught myself. But what would come of him but I caught myself. I realized that it had a very eerie undertone to it, so I rushed to close my mouth shut.
どうした？
Nothing. Our conversation stopped yet again. Saito-san looked up at the sky and stared at the light emanating from the moon. Saito-san, can I ask you something?
なんだ？
If you got injured, like Heisuke or Sanan-san, or if you had to help your friends, would you drink the water of life?
飲む。その時俺になすべき役目があるのならな。
He showed no hesitation. Like, he responded quick. Indeed, he hadn't even taken a second to answer. That worried me. But...
意外か？
No. I had a feeling that's how Saito-san would have answered. When Ito-san had left, he followed Hijikata-san's orders and acted as a spy. When he returned, all the things the other warriors had said didn't faze him, and he just diligently followed orders. It's almost as if nothing ever fazes him.
雪村、これを見ろ。
In one smooth movement, he drew his sword from its sheath. Moonlight glinted off the blade, bright but cold.
この剣が今までどれほどの血を吸ってきたか、もう覚えてもいない。
His voice was quiet and hard.
敵も味方も数えきれんほど切り殺してきた。ならば俺もいつかは戦いの中で死ぬだろう。それが因果というものだ。落ち水を飲もうと飲むまいと、羅刹となろうとなるまいと、俺がなすことは同じ。この刀で新選組の敵を切る。 そしていつの日か俺自身も切られ剣に倒れる。ただそれだけのことだ。
There seemed to be no emotion attached to the thought of his own death. But this sword has also protected me. Saito silently listened. I know I don't have any right to say that killing people is bad. But you've used that sword against others to protect me. I share your karma. I'm alive because someone else is dead. Even so, I still want to live. I want my friends to live. I want you to live. Even if that means someone has to die. Does that make me a bad person?
いや、あんたはそれでいい。あんたがそう思うなら、そう願うのなら、己の誠を貫けばいい。
Saito eventually put his sword away.
話し込んでしまったな。そろそろ屯所へ帰れ。俺も三浦の警護に戻る。
Without warning, he turned, walked to an empty section of road, and stopped.
山崎、島田もそこにいるのだろう。
Hi, boys.
もう日も落ちている。物陰からの護衛では万に一つのことがないとも限らんからな。雪村を屯所まで無事に送り届けてくれ。
In response to Saito-san, Yamazaki-san and Shimada popped up.
わかりました。
Yamazaki-san? Shimada? Why are you two here?
この二人が来ているということは副長の命令以外にありえまい。
I'm gonna guess that's because we didn't come back automatically. Immediately.
おっしゃる通りです。ですが、いつから我々がいることに？
初めからだ。俺も患者働きが多いからな。
なるほど。
では行く。あんたたちも行け。
I called out to Saito-san one last time as he headed back towards the Tenma Inn. Saito-san! He stopped walking and I called out towards his back. Good luck! And please, don't die. It was hardly something he would have cared to hear, but I meant every word of it. It may be his wish to die during his mission, but I wanted him to know. Eventually, he quietly turned to look my way. For a moment, I thought I saw a smile cross his face. With Saito-san gone, we turned and made our way back towards the Shinsengumi. And we can skip this. Oh boy. We're at chapter 5. December 1867. As the order to begin the Imperial Restoration came, the Sacho troops started occupying the city of Kyo. At the same time, members and affiliates of the Tokugawa Shogunate were being removed from the Imperial Palace and eventually Kyo altogether. They, as expected, did not take this lightly. In response, the Shogunate's military forces were beginning to march from Edo to Kyo. As tensions rose from the approaching shogunate armies, the Sacho were preparing their own forces for a hostile confrontation. The situation was growing increasingly frenzied. As the shogunate scrambled to call upon their remaining allies, the Shinsengumi received an order to come to the Fushimi magistrate. Having all of their men and armaments gathered in the Fushimi magistrate enabled the shogunate to act in the event of an emergency, so off we went. On one such day during the commotion.
Oi, 大変だ! 近藤局長が何者かに狙撃されたぞ!
Bad news was delivered to the Fushimi magistrate. Kagom broom. Broom broom broom. There had been no witnesses, and the culprit escaped unseen. Their motives could only be guessed.
ふざけんじゃねえ! 誰が撃ちやがったんだ! 行くぞ! 手の空いてるやつは俺についてこい!
Nagakura got a crew of warriors together, and they all headed towards the location where Kondo-san was shot. Kondo-san's gunshot wound was on his right shoulder. The bullet pierced clean through him, shattering the bone, which required more treatment than I could have given him at the compounds. I was sweeping up the common room when...
Oya, Yukimura-kun. Mada okite itan desu ka?
Sanan-san, did you have any business here? If you're going to use this room, I'll leave.
いいえ、構いませんよ。君にも同席してもらった方がいいでしょう。
Huh? His words perplexed me, so I felt a little not anxious. Just then, the most prominent Shinsengumi captains began filing into the common room. What were they about to discuss? My anxiety was starting to grow stronger.
みんな揃ってるみてえだな。
沖田君の姿が見当たらないようですが。
あいつには聞かせる必要はねえ。もし掃除に渡しちまったら、身の危険も顧みずに近藤さんの仇を取りに行くに決まってるからな。
それが彼の望みならば、そうさせてあげるべきなのでは。土方君は相変わらず優しすぎますよ。
俺たちに一体何の用なんだ？いつ戦が始まるかもわからねえ今、わざわざ呼び出したってことは、まさか。
そのまさかですよ。君たちにどうしても渡しておかなくてはならないものがありまして。
In his hands was an object wrapped in a fine cloth that he slowly unwrapped before all of us. As I saw what was inside of his hands, I gasped and clasped my hands over my mouth.
それは落ち水ですか？
その通りです。我々は新選組幹部としてこの薬の研究を受け入れ、今まで実験を続けてきたことについて最後まで責任を取らなくてはなりません。何より近藤さんのように怪我をして剣を震えなくなったり、最悪の場合命を落とすことだってあり得るのです。この薬はそんな時必ずや役に立ってくれるはずです。
三男さん、あんた俺たちを薬の実験道具にしようってのか？
今の状況で幹部大使の誰か一人でも欠けては困ると言っているだけですよ。
ふざけんじゃねえ！俺はこんな薬に頼ってまで生きながらえたくはねえぜ。
Nagakura barked his indignation to Sana-san's proposal and then he stormed off.
お守り代わりってところかね。この薬を飲むような状況にならないことを祈りたいが。
Inoue spoke softly as his fingers pinched the vial and held it close to his eye.
お借りします。
まあ、使うことはねえと思うが、一応受け取っとくぜ。
Both Saito-san and Harada grabbed the vial and they slipped it into their respective pockets.
土方君。
Up until now, Hijikata-san had crossed his arms and silently observed Sanan-san's speech.
責任を取らなきゃならねえか。まあ、確かにその通りだよな。
His eyes looked troubled, but he reached for the serum and slipped it into his pockets as well.
それでは、今夜はこれで解散とします。私の行為が無にならないよう祈っていますよ。
After Sanan-san had finished, the captains all bowed and left the room, and Sanan-san turned towards me.
雪村君、分かっていると思いますが、今夜のことは他の大使には決して口外しないように。いいですね。
Timidly, I nodded my head, and Sanan-san waited for a second before nodding silently and leaving the room. What could I do? The serum created by my father was now in the hands of the captains. I shuddered at the thought of them drinking it.
局長を襲った刺客の正体はまだつかめないのか。どうせ薩長の奴らに決まってるぜ。卑怯な真似を。
Ever since the attack on Kondo-san, the atmosphere of the Fushimi Magistrate's office has been tense, to say the least. I felt it increase as I stepped into the meeting room carrying tea for the captains. Here's your tea.
お、ありがとうな。そこに置いといてくれ。
I seemed to have walked in on a serious discussion. All around the room there were tense, drawn faces.
で、今後どうするつもりなんだ。薩摩の奴らは政権返上だけじゃ飽き足らず、徳川家が持ってる領地も何もかも返せって言ってやがるんだろ。どう考えても戦を始めるための口実作りとしか思えねえぜ。
Now I'm out of water. So if you'll excuse me for a few minutes.
今のうちに戦う準備を進めておくに越したことはね。
I'm back.
だろうな。奴らは年若い天使様を担ぎ上げて我が物顔で朝廷に出入りしてやがる。で、そいつらとの戦の準備をどうするかだな。
三男さんは羅刹隊の増強を主張してらっしゃるようですが。
A memory of the other day came back to me. Sona-san offered the water of life to all of the captains and they accepted it.
俺は反対だ。これからの戦は不逞老子を取り締まってた頃とは違う。敵味方入り乱れて戦う中で連中の手綱をうまく取れるとは思えねえ。戦力にはなるが危険すぎるぜ。
だな。何より人道的に見て問題があるだろ
う。では他にどんな策がある？他の者の意見に異を唱えるのであれば代案を出すべきだと思う
が。だから俺らだって考えてんだろ。そんなすぐいい案が出たら苦労しねえよ。
副長はどう思われます？
Yashikata-san furrowed his brow and frowned.
とりあえずもう少し考えさせてくれ。敵の出方を見なきゃ何とも言えねえし、幕府側の意向もあるからな。
Kondo-san's injury had put everyone on edge, especially with the war inching closer day by day. What was going to become of the Shinsengumi as well as the Fury Corps? December 20th, 1867. It was decided that Kondo-san and Okita were to be moved to Osaka, where Matsumoto-sensei was. Kondo-san had required serious surgery and treatment, while Okita needed to treat his tuberculosis. Only a few people had caught on to Okita's condition initially, but when it came time for him to leave, it was as if a dark cloud hovered over all of us. The departure of these two leaders brought solemnity and sadness to us all. January 3rd, 1868. I was busying myself in the compound room around the time the men began to return from their patrols.
ただいま。今日の冬は相変わらず骨にくるよな。
Oh, welcome back, guys.
ったく、薩摩の連中め。めでてえ時期だってのに、軍勢率いて今日に押しかけてきやがって。おかげで雑煮を食う暇すらねえじゃねえか。少しは考えろよな。
He continued muttering angrily to himself as he pulled off his coat and hung it up.
長倉君、外を歩いている時からずっと雑煮の話ばっかりだね。
だってさ、正月はやっぱ餅食って寝るのが醍醐味ってもんだろ。それとももしかして薩摩には正月がねえのかな。
How was it out there?
さして問題はなかった。今のところはだが。
I see. Saito-san's reassurance allowed me to relax, if only a little. I had no idea what might happen in the days to come, but I thought it would be nice to at least enjoy the New Year's festivities in peace. I just let out a small sigh of relief when a noise like a small thunderclap sounded from somewhere outside the compound.
今の銃声だったよな。
The earlier good humor evaporated, and every face in the room turned towards the source of the sound, tense and serious.
ああ、とうとう始まりやがったか。
That gunshot was the beginning of what would later become known as the Battle of Toba Fushimi. We later learned that the Satsuma had opened fire on shogunate soldiers attempting to enter Kyo, but at the time we heard it, we knew nothing.
どっちの兵が撃ったんだ？ちょっくら外に出て確認してくるか。
落ち着け。副長が戻られる前に勝手な行動は起こさぬ方がいい。
とりあえず他の大使にも声かけてきた方が良さそうだな。ちょっと行ってくるぜ。
Sato-san nodded and Harada ran off. Within moments, the atmosphere in the magistrate office changed. What should I do?
そうだな。あんたは
Then it happened. A deafening explosion tore through the air, and the building itself shook. It was no gunshot this time.
なんだ？いきなり地震が起こったわけじゃねえよな。ってことは。
Saito and Nagakura looked at one another, then ran off out the door of the building.
どうなってやがんだよこりゃ。
I could hear their voices outside. What was going on? A cluster of shots rang out and I jumped. Saito-san returned, his placid face even more stern than usual. Saito-san, what's going on?
隣の龍雲寺に大砲が仕掛けられている。おそらく薩摩の連中の仕業だ。
A cannon? No. The wall shook again as the cannon's thunderous report tore through the air.
このままじゃ壁を破られちまうのも時間の問題だぜ。
He swore in frustration.
新八、敵の懐に飛び込んで向こうの大砲を奪うってのはできねえのか。
ちと難しそうだな。なんせ奴らは銃を持ってやがるし、それも一人や二人じゃね
え。Isn't there some way we can make them stop shooting at us? I mean, couldn't we shoot back at them with a cannon or something? It was a foolish idea and I knew it, but I felt so useless just standing around and screaming. I had to do something.
ここにも一応大砲は運び込んである。
Well, then can't we just shoot at them?
だがたとえ撃ったとしても効果は薄い。
Why not?
敵の陣はここより高台にある。低いところから高いところに撃ち込んでもおそらく弾は届かない。それに龍雲寺は森に囲まれている。敵陣に当たる前に木々で防がれてしまう。
No, no. Whoops, sorry, I skipped over your line. Then there was nothing we could do? We just had to sit here and let them attack us? Just that was when Shimada ran in.
大変です。薩摩の部隊がこの伏見奉行所を包囲しようとしています。
Sato-san sucked at his teeth, and I could see his mind working furiously, searching for a solution.
建物にかなりの損傷が出てるみてえだな。このままだと崩れちまうのも時間の問題か。
Hijikata-san appeared short of breath and wearing his headguard and Shinsengumi uniform. Hijikata-san!
近藤さんに本隊の指揮を任された。これから反撃するぞ。
His words sent the magistrate's office into a frenzy.
よっしゃ、そうこなくっちゃな。やられっぱなしってのは性に合わねえよ。さっきから体がうずうずしまって。
で、どういう作戦で行くつもりなんだ。大砲で反撃すんのか。
当たらねえ大砲を引っ張り出しても意味がねえ。ここは最前線に打って出るしかねえだろう。運が良けば向こうの武器を奪うこともできるかもしれね
え。よし、そう来ねえとな。
やってやろうじゃねえか。薩長のやつら見てやがれよ。
They all seemed more than ready to fight, but something still worried me. Saito-san, how many men do they have? If he can take their cannon, will we win?
幕兵の数は1万5000。薩長の兵の数は多く見積もってもその半数と聞いている。
Then we can't lose, right? Sato-san's mouth thinned to a tight line, and he looked at me for a moment before he answered.
定石通りならばな。
I was about to ask him what he meant when Hijikata-san began to call out orders.
よし、敵を一歩たりとも敷地内に入れるんじゃねえぞ。焦らず倒していけ。源さん、ここの守りを頼む。俺は部隊を率いて本陣を攻めてくるからな。
ああ、任せておいてくれ、トシさん。
He nodded and trotted off towards the entrance.
さっき入った報告じゃ、敵の本陣は五光宮神社らしいが、途中にでっかい坂がありやがる。しかも坂の上には銃を持った兵が構えてると来てる。登ってる間に狙い撃ちされちまうな。これを打開する策といや。
Hijikata-san's voice trailed off, but all of the men around him understand what that silence implied. If they were to win, they would have to thrust their forces into the heart of the enemy encampment, and that would mean running straight into a line of gunfire. The men who left to go on the attack would be facing a good deal more danger than those left at the magistrate's office. There was a moment of silence before Nagakura fixed Hijikata-san with a confident look and spoke.
よし、わかった。そんじゃ、俺が切り込んでくるぜ。
やってくれるか、新八。
誰かが行かなきゃならねえんだろ。だったら行くさ。このままやられっぱなしで何もできねえまま終わりよりゃいい。
He gave Hijikata-san a grin, then turned to his men in the second division.
悪いな、2番組のみんな。命知らずな組長を持ったせいで地獄の底まで突き合わせることになっちまって。
何を言ってるんですか、長倉組長。俺は武士ですから、今さら命なんて惜しくありませんよ。
Sato-san looked up as Shimada spoke. Was something wrong? I thought perhaps he looked as if he wanted to say something, but it could have just as easily been my imagination.
よし、それじゃ2番組を切り込み隊に指名する。五光宮神社を攻撃してきてくれ。
ああ、任せといてくれよ。この長倉新八、ただじゃ死なねえぜ。
飛び込む時は俺たち10番組が援護してやるからな。安心して突っ込んでってくれよ。
それでは行ってまいります。
With grins and more playful banter, Nagakura, Shimada, and Harada sauntered outside and out of sight. The roles they were playing were very dangerous, and they were really risking their lives. But neither Nagakura nor Shimada showed a sign of fear. I'd always wondered, how could they go in with such bravery? I saw a muscle in Hijikata-san's jaw twitch as he watched them go. Then he turned towards the rest of us.
斉藤、お前は部下を連れて龍雲寺に向かってくれ。とりあえずあの砲撃を止めなきゃどうにもならね
え。わかりました。
His voice was as flat and measured as ever. Whatever he might be thinking, it was impossible for me to guess. Hijikata-san, what should I do? I tried asking Hijikata-san, but Saito interrupted.
あんたはここに残っていろ。今度ばかりは生き延びられる保証などない。
Oh. He turned on his heel without so much as a goodbye and headed for Ryun Temple. It wasn't going to be an easy fight. Would they even return alive? This was the first time the Shinsengumi had fought such a large force, as well as the first time they'd faced guns and cannons. I believed in their skill, but I couldn't help feeling a certain amount of trepidation. With little else to do, I felt to praying for their safety and lost myself in my worries. I don't know how much time had passed. I felt a hand on my shoulder.
雪村君、大丈夫かい？ずいぶん落ち込んだ顔をしているようだが。
Oh, in a way.
出て行ったみんなのことが心配なんだね。
I know they're soldiers. They've been in danger before, but this is different. There's all those guns out there, and a cannon. I'm scared some of them might not come back.
大丈夫だ。ちゃんと戻ってくるとも。
You really think so?
決まっているだろう。武士というのは何があっても決して約束をたがえたりしないものだよ。あの状況で決死隊に志願した長倉君や島田君、そして斉藤君は今の世には珍しい本物の武士だ。武士というのは、男というのは決して女の子を悲しませたりはしないものだよ。だから大丈夫だ。
His words helped to calm my doubts. It was natural for me to worry, but I had forgotten they were all talented, intelligent men, capable of forging their own destinies, not frightened boys sent off to war and subjects to the whims of fate. Courage in the faces of death was a true samurai's greatest asset, and they had courage aplenty. You're right. I believe in them. They'll come back safely. The words were only just out of my mouth when Yamazaki ran into the magistrate's office, his face drawn.
山崎君、どうしたんだね。
井上さん、敵陣営付近の兵は銃で武装しているため、とても近寄れません。こちらが間合いに近づく前に撃たれてしまい、どうにもなりませんでした。
そうか。これはいかんね。敵の主力は鉄砲か。ならば日が沈んだ後なら狙いを定めにくくなる
な。After the sun sets? Do you mean? He nodded solemnly.
羅刹隊を派遣するしかないだろう。
そうですね。それしかないでしょう。
三男さんと東堂君に伝えてこなくては。山崎君、一緒に来てくれ。
わかりました。
Sometime later, the Fury Corps moved out under San-Anson's command. They did have strength far beyond any humans. Perhaps they would be able to turn the tables. So, why don't I feel relieved? Something still felt wrong. This battle was unlike anything I'd experienced before, and my mind was still racing to catch up. I felt as if I was missing something important, but... what? A gunshot sounded from the entrance. Our men would have had no reason to fire, which means it had to be...
おい！新選組の主力は奉行所から出払ってるみたいだぜ。今のうちに崩せ。
Only moments after the soldier's voice reached me, Yamazaki ran into the room, his eyes wide.
井上さん、このままでは奉行所は落ちます。せめて一体だけでも呼び戻さなくては。
しかし誰が伝令に行くと言うんだい。ここを開けてしまうのはまずかろ
う。俺が伝令に向かいます。ですから。
Inoue shook his head.
山崎君を行かせるわけにはいかんよ。情けない話だが、私一人ではこの奉行所を守りきるのは無理だ。
それは。
Yamazaki frowned and began pacing back and forth. Once again, the deafening thunder of the cannon shook the magistrate's office. If the bombardment continued, we were surely done for. I'll do it! I'll deliver the message!
しかし君では。
I know I'm no good in a fight. I mean, I can barely protect myself, and it'd be difficult for me to take down a warrior from the Satsuma or Choshu, but I think I could probably make it to Gokunomiya Ryu Temple without being discovered. And I was a demon after all. If I was wounded, it would heal quickly. In fact, I could probably take 1 or 2 bullets and not die. If one of you leaves, then we won't have any hope of mounting a defense when the Satsuma attack. But if I go, you'll still be at full strength. I wouldn't be fighting anyway, even if I did stay here.
確かにな。今ここを離れることのできる人間は君しかいないだろう。
Inoue seemed torn, but it took him only moments to make up his mind. He wasn't happy about it, but we all knew there was no time to waste.
わかった。それでは君に行ってもらうことにしよう。
うん。
だが君が行くのであれば、敵本陣の五光宮神社は危険だ。斉藤君のいる龍雲寺の方に行ってもらおう。彼にここの現状を伝え、すぐ戻るように言ってほし
い。Yes, sir.
俺たちが薩摩勢の目を引きつけておく。その間に裏から出るんだ。
Right. Thank you.
ここを落とせば新選組は終わりだ。行け！
ここから先には一歩も入れんぞ。
当たらない鉄砲などただのおもちゃに過ぎん。かかってこい。
I said a silent prayer of thanks and protection for Inoue and Yamazaki and ran for the back door. I ran through the darkened forest, the stars and a little light down beneath the canopy. The night was thick and black, and I could barely see, but fear would have to wait. I had no time. I could hear the cannon firing again and again in the darkness. There had to be fighting going on nearby, although I couldn't see it. I hoped fervently that everyone was safe, if I could just make it in time. I felt someone nearby and slowed to a halt. All around me were men wearing the blue jackets of the Shinsengumi, grimacing in pain. It wasn't just a few of them. They'd gathered together in groups, spread out through this part of the forest, at the center. Saito-san stood, sword in hand, his chest heaving. What was going on? I'd never seen him so tired.
なるほど。目を見張る体力です。生身の体で我々鬼の動きについてくるとは。
Beyond Saito-san stood Amagiri, the demon. Oh. I stepped back and a twig snapped beneath my foot. Slowly, deliberately, Hamagiri's gaze turned towards me.
おや、 君はこのようなところで何をしているのです？まさか今日が戦場と化した今も彼らと行動を共にしているのですか？
I chose to ignore Amagiri and turned instead towards Saito-san. Saito-san, there's trouble! The Satama are attacking the Fushimi Magistrate's office!
Nani?
You have to call off the attack on the Ryuin Temple and rush back to the Magistrate office right away!
Wakatta.
He inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement, then turned back to Amagiri. His eyes blew slits. The moment the last word was out of his mouth, he leapt forward with tremendous speed, and his sword flickered through the air, heading straight for Amagiri. At first, I didn't believe what I was seeing. Amagiri had caught the incoming blade with his bare hands and flung it aside. Then, in the same moment, he made to chop his hand into Saito-san's unguarded side. He deflected Amagiri's blow with his left arm and struck again with his sword. He dodged to the side, avoiding the sword thrust, but Saito-san took the split-second opening to launch another attack, driving Amagiri back. His steel shimmered in the night, leaping through the air and snaking its way through Amagiri's defenses to strike at his vitals. The very tip of Saito's sword slid across Amagiri's cheek, and a thin line of blood trickled down his face.
君の実力はある程度理解しているつもりでしたが、それでも驚かされました。まさか人の身で私と戦える者がこの世に存在したとは。あなたは素晴らしい使い手です、斎藤。おそらく鬼ですらあなたと対等に戦える者は多くないでしょう。
褒め言葉など俺には無意味だ。俺は一介の武士に過ぎんからな。
He paused a moment to wipe sweat beating off of his forehead.
しかし、その強さはあくまでも人のものに過ぎません。人の身の限界というものを思い知らせてあげましょう。
What I saw next, I could scarcely believe. On Amagiri's forehead, horns appeared, great white things, like what you might see in old books or paintings. His hair turned white like that of a fury, and his eyes began to glow with a strange, otherworldly light. When he spoke, his voice rumbled with a terrible power.
この姿を人前にさらしたのはこれが初めてです。君の強さに敬意を抱いているからこそ全力で戦わせていただきます。
As he leapt towards Saito-san like a bullet from a gun, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. He was far, far faster than he had been a moment before. Saito-san did his best to keep up with Amagiri's blows, but he seemed slower now. No, Saito-san wasn't slower. Amagiri was just too fast for him.
それが人の身の限界ですか?
He sounded almost disappointed. Saito-san cried out as Amagiri struck his left arm. Saito-san! I was about to run up to him.
近づくな!
奴らの狙いはあんただということを忘れたのか、雪村。 ここであんたをこの男に連れ去られては俺は務めを全うできぬことになる。
Oh.
殊勝な心がけです。上役から課せられた命は君にとってそれほどまでに大切なものなのですね。ならば手心を加えることこそ失礼に当たるというもの。
Amagiri kicked the ground.
乗れ。
Saito-san tried to swing with one more decisive blow as Amagiri charged towards him, but even so, Amagiri saw right through him. Then suddenly, before Saito-san could block, he threw an iron fist punch into him. He ground his teeth and swift it dripped down his forehead. The pain he was feeling had to be incredible. Had Amagiri's blow broken his arm? But he ran towards Amagiri, his sword held high, and defiance burning in his eyes. He batted Saito-san's attack aside one after another, as calmly as if he were waving away flies. Saito-san was in bad shape. He looked tired, and though he had managed to ignore the pain, his arm still clearly hurt him. If he didn't gain the upper hand and quickly, he'd lose to his own fatigue. Yeah, let's retreat for now. Saito-san, we have to retreat. He frowned. Although he was a man of few words, Saito-san took things such as missions and orders very seriously. To him, a retreat would be an incredible disgrace. But they're waiting for you to come back. I know you don't want to, but you have to retreat. If you keep fighting here, then what will happen to Inoue and Yamazaki? Those words seemed to hit the mark. Saito-san stopped and then slowly lowered his sword, his breathing heavy. That's right. His voice was quiet. Who are you guys? Why are you always getting in the way of the Shinsengumi?
我々が鬼の一族だということは以前お伝えしたはずですが、鬼の起源についてはどこまでご存知ですか？
What?
人間たちがこの日の本に住み着くはるか以前から我々鬼はこの日の本で暮らしていました。ですが人間がこの地で暮らすようになり、我々は次第に里を追われ、山中に隠れ住むこととなったのです。
Sen had told me something about this before. The demon clan asked time and time again for aid from the dominion of man, and time again men turned them down.
風間家の当主風間千景は今回の騒乱を利用し、各地に散り散りになった鬼の力を一つにまとめ、この日の本を再び鬼の手に取り戻そうとしているのです。
No.
あんたも風間とやらの意見に賛同している口か。
Amagiri shook his head.
鬼は影の存在で良いと思っています。歴史の表舞台になど出るべきではない。ただ平穏に暮らせれば良いのです。薩摩藩に手を貸してきたのは 関ヶ原の戦いの時の縁を頼られてのこと。私は行動や風間の考えに賛同しているわけではないのです。
What? What does my father have to do with any of this? Don't tell me. Father is like Kazama. Did he really want to create a world of demons just like Kazama?
話はそれだけか。俺は時間稼ぎに乗るつもりなどない。これ以上の無駄話には付き合えんぞ。
His eyes had narrowed to angry slits. He smiled.
彼の力量に免じ、このまま見逃しましょう。
With a small shudder, Amagiri's horns disappeared, and his hair turns back to its normal human color.
一体どういうことだ？
私は風間たちの目的には賛同できないのですよ。そのようなことに利用されようとしている彼女には同情さえ感じます。
I wasn't sure what to think of Amagiri. It didn't seem like his intention was to be kind to us, and yet he was allowing Saito-san and his men and myself to leave. At the very least, it seemed, he had some sense of justice.
とりあえず、この男はこれ以上我々と戦うつもりはないようだ。雪村、負傷した大使の中で歩けぬほどの重傷を負った者はいたか？
No, I don't think so.
では皆と共に奉行所へ戻る。あんたは俺の後ろをついてこい。
We had just turned to leave when he spoke one last time.
風間は私よりもはるかに強い力を有しています。人の手で彼女を守りきるのは無理でしょう。今後は別行動を取ることを勧めます。
And with that, he disappeared into the night like silent mist. Saito stood stock still for several moments, where Amagiri had disappeared, his gaze fierce. Come on, Saito-san. We need to go. He didn't seem to hear me. Saito-san? Are you alright? Did you get hurt?
この俺が無視の相手に。
His voice was so quiet I could barely hear him. After several more seconds of silence, he slowly raised his head.
何でもない。奉行所へ戻るぞ。時間がないと言っていただろう。
Too hot! Ah! The air's on. I'm sorry you can hear it. Right. What had Saito-san been thinking about? Was he really alright? Pensive silence was nothing new for him, but I'd felt something different from him this time. Frustration, perhaps? As we ran back, the rustling of leaves resounded through the night streets.
待て。
When we reached the hill, Saito-san stopped suddenly in his tracks. What's the matter? He watched as, below the hill, the town of Fushimi was within eye distance from the top, and it was lit ablaze with a roaring flame.
あれはまさか伏見奉行所か。
I gasped at the sight. No! The Shinsengumi were protecting the magistrate, but now he was on fire? Inoue and Yamazaki were there.
薩長軍に 火をかけられたか、あるいは撤退する際に自ら火をかけたか。
I could see a color of bitterness in Saito-san's. And well, the... There's a word that shouldn't be there. I could see a color of bitterness in Saito-san's well-being of his comrades. If the Fushimi magistrate were to fall, then it would mean the Shinsengumi were now driven from the town they spent 4 years protecting. For Saito-san, a man who always held his duty to the Shinsengumi above all else, this must have been the most regrettable feeling. I struggled to find meaningful words to say, so instead I just hung my head low.
まだ負けたわけではない。幕府が、新選組が健在でこの俺が武士である限り、奴らとは必ず刀を交えることになる。今度こそは。
His expression warped, and I could swear that I could hear his teeth grinding. Saito took one last look down at the burning scenery of Fushimi below. Then...
雪村、我々はこれから大坂城へ向かうぞ。あそこには総大将の慶喜公、そして松本先生や近藤局長、宗次がいる。おそらく副長や他の大使たちもそこにいるはずだ。決してはぐれぬようついてこい。
All right. Saito and I led the rest of his men towards Osaka Castle. No sooner than had we reached the base of the mountain, however, we encountered an enemy patrol. Several gunshots echoed through the forest. I wasn't sure if they were an actual attack or just a warning.
どうやら囲まれているようだな。
The crack of a gunshot sounded again, closer this time, and I jumped.
落ち着け。声を出すと居場所を蹴取られるぞ。
Right. I shrunk down as small as I possibly could and held my hands desperately over my mouth.
もう少しで日が沈む。そうすれば向こうの持つ銃も役に立たなくなる。
I'm sorry. The gunfire had scared me, but if it made too much noise, then I could endanger Saito-san and the other Shinsengumi. Eventually the sun did set and the forest fell into darkness. The gunshots slowed, then stopped. So suddenly it was very quiet.
これだけ暗くなれば狙いをつけるのは難しいだろう。暗闇では卵目にも時間がかかる。敵方の目を盗んで下山するなら今のうちだ。
Let's go. We stepped out of the thicket we'd been hiding in and headed off down the mountain. We hadn't been walking for long when the guns started again, likely because of our footsteps. This time, however, they seemed to be shooting anywhere and everywhere, not directly at us. Can they even see us? It seems Saito-san had been right about a loss of precision once night had fallen. They could see shadows moving and hear our footsteps, but between the darkness and the trees, actually finding us was proving difficult. We might actually be able to join up with the rest of the men at this rate.
そうだな。
一体誰と合流するつもりだ。虫けらが何人集まったところでさしたる力にはなり得ぬぞ。
It was him.
久しぶりだな、雪村の娘。我が妻となる女鬼よ。 まだそのようなひ弱な連中と行動を共にしているのか。
You. Of all the times we could have encountered Kazuma, why now? I didn't realize I'd been frozen to the spot by... Frozen to the stopped. What? I didn't realize I'd been frozen to the spot by stepped between Kazuma and myself. Ooh. I didn't realize I had been frozen in place when Saito-san stepped between Kazuma and myself. That line makes more sense.
あんたは下がっている。
As he spoke, Saito-san drew his sword. But
いいから下がっていろ。
there was steel in his tone this time.
俺と戦うつもりか。こいつはいい。戦の最中に貴重な女鬼を死なされてはたまらんと思う。奪い取りに来た。貴様ごときがこの俺とまともに切り合えるとでも思っているのか。
He chuckled again as he drew his own sword. Kazuma's hair turned white. He looked almost godly, like a lion.
そういう。貴様は以前この俺に居合とやらを見舞おうとしたことがあったが、せっかくあの時見逃してやったというわざわざ死にに来る。酔狂なやつだ。
It wasn't just how he looked, though. His desire to kill was fiercely radiating. Amagiri had said that Kazuma was even more powerful than he was, and Saito-san had been clearly outmatched by Amagiri. Just watching from afar makes me understand that this man knew what he was talking about. Kazuma possessed powers far beyond what even someone like Saito-san could hope to fight against. So why? Saito-san made the first move. His sword raised high over his head, he charged forward and brought it down towards Kazuma's right shoulder. But when the sword reached its destination, Kazuma was simply gone. Saito-san snapped his head around looking for his opponent. A silver blade flew through the night towards Saito-san. I heard the horrible wet sound of a blade passing through flesh, and blood splattered to the ground. Saito-san grunted and swung his sword back towards Kazuma, but again he cut only air. The demon darted around behind him, his sword glistening with gore. More blood dripped onto the forest floor. Saito-san grounded his teeth, his eyes wide with pain, but he kept his feet and tired desperately to match Kazuma's attack. Oh, and tried desperately to match Kazuma's attack. Okay. But his foe was too fast, and as soon as Saito-san had found him, he had disappeared or struck again. The night air was filled with grunts of pain and the sickening hiss of steel through flesh. Every inch of his clothes was soaked in blood, but still Saito-san glared at Kazuma with fiery hatred.
よくも組長の敵覚悟しろ
Two of the men who'd been watching leapt towards Kazuma as Saito-san fell back.
よせ、お前たちには無理だ。
Kazuma's sword shimmered, and the two men fell to the ground. He didn't even blink. His skill with the sword was nothing short of superhuman. His blade moved too fast for my eyes to catch.
二人がかりで来てこのざま。なんという脆い生き物だ。どうした？悔しそうな顔をして。この俺が憎いか。
Sato-san said nothing and tightened his blood-stained hands around the hilt of his sword. He ran towards Kazuma, all of his strength behind this desperate attack. Kazuma blade sliced across his body, and blood rained down onto the dirt. He stood still, but blood loss, fatigue were taking their toll, and even I could see he was getting slower. Nonetheless, his hands stayed clasped around his sword, even if his arms could no longer lift it. Even against Samagiri, he hadn't been beaten so completely. I know he had just told me to stay back, but... Saito-san! Please, you have to stop! I'll just go with him! Then he'll leave you and your men alone!
女鬼が助け舟を出してくれているぞ。素直に甘えたらどうだ。この後どれだけ切り合ってもこの俺の優位は揺るがぬ。それに気づかぬほど間抜けでもあるまい。なに、ここで逃げたところで黙っていれば誰にもわからん。女鬼の護衛を仰せつかっていたが力及ばず奪い去られたとでも報告しておけばいいだけのことだ。
I looked up to Sato-san, my eyes pleading. Kazuma's words were hardly subtle, but if Saito-san did leave me behind, I was sure no one would blame him.
たとえ人の目がなかったとしても、貴様に屈するつもりはない。彼女も俺の部下もこの手でこの剣で守る。守るだ。
そのボロ切れのような体と生倉刀でか。哀れすぎて何も言えぬな。負け犬なら負け犬らしく惨めに尻尾を巻いて逃げ出せばいいもの。
But Saito-san made no move to leave. His eyes burned with fury, even as the rest of him bled and slumped.
もしここで逃げ出せば、俺の心の中にある大切なものを裏切ることになる。
これはいい。大切なものを裏切ることになるときたか。
He laughed as he drove his sword into Saito's body.
その大切なものとは何だ。ちっぽけな誇りか。犬の餌にもならぬ名誉とやらか。答えてみろ、人間。虫以下の矮小な生き物が何を大切だと抜かす。
He no longer had even enough strength to lift his arms and block Kazuma's attacks. No, please, stop! I couldn't stand to just sit and watch, so I unsheathed my kodachi. And I charged straight for Kazuma. However... Kazuma saw me in the corner of his eye and kicked me to the floor, and I couldn't even buy Saito-san time. Just then, I watched as Saito-san's body slumped, and his body dropped to the ground. From here, it seemed like he was still breathing. But at this rate, it's only a matter of time before he would lose enough blood to die. Then a tiny vial dropped from Saito-san's pocket, twinkling against his kimono. Oh no, that's... It was a bottle of the water of life.
貴様それをどうするつもりだ
Saito-san lifted his bloody face to glare at Kazuma. Then... With his last bit of strength, he grabbed the bottle. Well, stop, Saito. You don't need that serum! Even without the water of life, Saito-san, you are very strong!
俺の剣技に芯を置いてくれているのはありがたいが、今この男に勝利する方法は他にはない。
Saito-san popped the lid off the bottle, and he gulped the contents of the bottle. Saito-san, no! I screamed so desperately it strained my throat. The next instant, the scars all over Saito-san's whole body began to regenerate. And then... there stood a Fury, his hair shimmering white. The sound effect is missing for this transformation, as well as Kazuma's from earlier and Amagidi's. Anyway, he seemed surprised by the sudden changes on his body, but just seeing his cuts and gashes to heal, he was renewed with a confident energy.
この俺に立ち向かおうとするか。貴様には何の誇りもないのだな。浅ましいものよ。
Saito-san's expression didn't change. With a slow hand, he wiped the dried blood from his face, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet and calm.
何とでも言え。これが俺にとっての誇りの形だ。新選組が彼女を守ると決めたなら、たとえ羅刹となってでも守り抜いてみせる。
He lifted his sword to a fighting stance. That sort of attitude was just what I would have expected from Saito-san, but for him to become a Fury simply because the Shinsengumi had ordered him to protect me was horrible. I had turned him into a monster.
これはいい。貴様は新選組のためなら人としての生すら捨てるつもりか。己の意志も考えも持ち合わせぬただの犬だな。
犬で構わん。己が正しいと信じた者に命を捧げられれば本望だ。
正しいと信じた者。落ち目の幕府と共に消えゆく時代錯誤の老子集団がか。
なんだと。
Saito-san threw himself towards Kazuma in the same breath, his words almost a snarl. The demon deflected his attack with ease and smiled back.
何度でも言ってやろう。幕府はすでに消え失せ、貴様ら残党もこの戦で滅び去る運命。落ち水を飲み羅刹となったところで、貴様の持つ刀にはもう何の意味もない。意地だの誇りだのと、わけのわからん世まいごとを抜かす武士とやらの時代は終わったのだ。黙れ。
He struck again and again, and it seemed that had closed the gap between them, at least somewhat. Bit by bit, Saito-san's well-aimed blows drove Kazuma back. The tension between them was almost palpable, like the air before a thunderstorm. From time to time, Kazuma landed a blow on of his own on Saito-san, but those wounds closed almost immediately, thanks to his new fury blood.
貴様がまがいものの鬼になり果てるとは思わなかった。せめてこの程度には力が拮抗していなくて遊びがいがない。
I'm sorry, Kazuma, I can't quite hear you. Your voice lines are so low.
そろそろ本気を出すとするか。まがいものの犬、覚悟はいい。
Just when Kazuma shouted that,
おやめなさい。
a familiar voice echoed through the night.
天霧、何の用だ。せっかくの宴を邪魔しに来たのか。
薩摩藩の方があなたを呼んでいますよ。早くお戻りなさい。
人間ごときが俺に命令だと。会いたいのなら貴様から出向けと伝えておけ。
ここはお戻りください。今薩摩藩といさかいを起こすわけにはいかない。あなたも分かっているでしょう。
面倒な。
He snarled and slammed his sword back into its scabbard.
まがいものの番犬よ。しばらくの間、我が妻をお前に預けておく。
Ah, yes, wife. Kazuma, I still want to throw you into the lava pit.
非力な貴様に命じること自体が不毛だと思う。絶対に死なせるな。いつか必ずその女鬼を奪いに行く。その時を楽しみに待っている。いいな。
And with that, he was gone. Amikiri's face told me he wanted to say something, but instead he turned and disappeared into the forest after his companion, and once again, we were plunged into silence. For several long moments, Saito-san stared after the two demons, saying nothing. Though I could sense a tumult of emotions behind that placid face, he betrayed none of what it might be. The sound effect was also missing from this one. With a shrug, his white hair melted back into its original color, and the red went out of his eyes.
夜が明ける前に山を降りるぞ。また厄介な連中がやってくるかもしれん。
His voice and manner were as they had always been, suggesting nothing of the ordeal he'd just been through. I felt my heart rise to my throat, and I turned away before the sight of him made me burst into tears. Sanan-san and Heisuke had already given up their humanity to become furious, and now Saito-san had just joined them. My heart felt like lead. Final chapter time. Sometime later, we finally arrived at Osaka Castle. So long as we were at the castle, we weren't likely to run into enemy patrols, and for that I was grateful. Saito-san, how are you feeling?
体とは
Well, I realized suddenly that I couldn't talk about the Furies openly with so many people around. Instead, I simply mumbled, at a loss for words. He must have guessed what I was getting at, and for a second or two before responding,
今のところは特に問題ない
Really? But Heisuke and Sona-san said that it was hard for them to be up during the day.
だとしても大使ではないあんたが気にするべきことではなかろう
Those words pierced my heart. Well, I mean, I could understand his coldness. But the water of life, the thing that would now change his entire life, was because of my father.
それにしても妙に騒がしいなもしや薩長との戦を控えて浮き足立っているのか
I wonder. The atmosphere in the castle was certainly restless, even as I watched wounded soldiers being carried in.
おい、そこにいるのって、もしかしてサイトか？
That voice!
やっぱりサイトだ。お前、生きてたのかよ。
ま、斎藤も新八にだけは言われたくねえだろうな。
Nagakura! Harada! You're both safe!
おうよ。この俺が薩長ごときに殺されるはずねえじゃねえか。斎藤はどこも怪我してねえみてえだな。さすが無敵の剣の持ち主。俺の目に間違いはなかったぜ。
Yeah, about that! Saito-san's mouth thinned, but he said nothing. There was no way Nagakura could have known the true reason for Saito-san's apparent good health. For a man like Saito-san, someone with absolute faith in his sword and his skill, to admit weakness and reach for the water of life, I could only imagine how torturous it must have been.
斉藤さん、雪村君、無事だったんですね。
Oh, it's Shimada!
よかった。
Ah, it's always nice to see Shimada. God damn, I wish he had a root.
城中探しても姿が見当たらなかったので、もしやと思ったんですが。
縁起でもねえこと言うなって。斎藤がついてたんだぜ。死ぬはずねえじゃねえか。
そうですよね。でも本当によかった。
He quickly scrubbed tears from his eyes with a fist and smiled at us. Oh, what happened to Yamazaki and Inoue? Were they hurt? Harada spoke up, but his voice was strained.
山崎は銃で撃たれて大怪我してる。今松本先生に見てもらってるが、かなり高い熱出して寝込んでるからな。この先どうなるのか微妙な感じだ。
Oh no. What about Inoue? He's alright, isn't he? I felt my stomach clench with dread. Inoue had to be alright. He had to. They were supposed to laugh it off, to smile and reassure me and say that Inoue was fine. But they didn't. It was Nagakura who finally spoke.
ゲンさんは亡くなった。腹にでっかい重曹ができてたさ。多分即死だったと思う。
No. My throat tightened, and I could feel tears raising to my eyes.
武士というのは何があっても決して約束をたがえたりしないものだよ。あの状況で決死隊に志願した長倉君や島田君、そして斎藤君は今の世には珍しい本物の武士だ。武士というのは、男というのは決して女の子を悲しませたりはしないものだよ。だから大丈夫だ。
In a way, I thought a samurai would never do anything to make a girl sad. So why did you die? I swallowed and my throat stung. It was horrible enough to think of the pain he had suffered from his bullet wound, but even worse was the desire he must have felt as he realized his life was coming to an end.
とりあえずみんなのところに行こうぜ。生き残ってる人間は集まってるはずだから。
Okay. I wiped my tears away and followed.
斎藤、それに雪村も生きてたのか。
心配をおかけして申し訳ございません、副長。
とりあえず生き残った幹部連中はこれで全員揃ったわけだな。
そうなるな。夢も希望もねえ作戦会議とシャレ込むか。
Hopeless?
いや、覚悟して聞いた方がいいぜ。俺も聞いた瞬間は頭から魂が抜けてどっかに飛んでっちゃいそうだったもん。
シンパシー、口の聞き方に気をつけろ。
Wait, what do you mean?
ま、結論から言うと、今回幕軍はかなりの苦境に立たされてる。
Satsuna told me that the Shogun forces numbered nearly 15,000 men, and that the Satsho and their allies commanded, at most, 5,000. Even I knew 3 to 1 was good odds, so how had the Shogunate ended up in trouble?
中立だとかわけのわからんことを抜かして援軍の要請を断る藩が多くてな。御三家筆頭の尾張藩までが日和見決め込んで中立派を名乗りやがった。
戦が始まってんのに中立もクソもねえだろ。はっきり薩長側に作って言わねえあたりがなんとも姑息だよな。
The 3 houses of the Tokugawa comprised one of the most prestigious domains in Japan. Many previous shoguns were alumni of this group. To think such domain betrayed the shogunate.
戦況はそんなに悪かったのですか。
薩長のやつらが化け物みてえに遠くまで届く新型の銃を使ってやがってな。こっちの射程の外から撃たれちまうんでどうにも防ぎようがねえ。おまけに連発式だから懐に飛び込む隙もねえときた。もう刀じゃ戦はできねえってことだな。
Saito-san looked down and said nothing. He'd built his life around the sword, and now, just like that, it meant nothing.
しかも敵方は銀の銃弾を使っていました。
Silver bullets? But why?
羅刹隊対策に決まってるだろ。向こうにも俺たちのことをよく知ってる奴がいるんだよ。
羅刹は並々ならぬ回復力を有していますが、銀の銃弾でつけられた傷だけは癒すことができません。我々の武器は人並み外れた体力と機敏さ、 そして回復力です。それを封じられてしまえばただの人間と変わりがない。
今回の戦で残ってた羅刹隊のやつらもほとんど殺されちまってさ、俺たちも途方に暮れてるとこなんだ。
That was when Saito-san finally spoke.
副長、ご報告したいことがあります。
なんだ、斉藤。
Saito-san looked straight into the commander's eyes and spoke in a calm, level voice.
俺はお預かりしていた落ち水を飲み、羅刹となりました。
なんだって。
Every face in the room turned to Saito-san, shocked.
お前、どうしてそんな真似したんだよ。
そうしなければならぬ状況だった。後悔はしていない。
Hijikata-san was silent for several moments.
そうか。お前もなっちまったか。
That was all he said.
あなたは素晴らしい決断をしましたよ、斉藤君。ようこそこちら側へ。
よし、とりあえず現状報告も終わったところで荷物をまとめてくれ。明日には船で江戸に向かうらしい。
江戸に向かうというのは何故？ここで慶喜公と共に籠城するのではないのですか？
Their faces fell when I spoke.
俺たちの総大将様は一生懸命戦ってた幕軍を置き去りにしてとっくに江戸に戻っちまってるんだとよ。
Did that say I? That should have been Saito, right? The fuck?
聞いた時はさすがに呆れたね。こんな戦前代未聞だぜ。多分これから先もねえんじゃねえの。今後の展開がどうなっちまうのか楽しみすぎてしょうがねえや。
Oh no. Inoue had died and Yamazaki had been wounded. Though they were the only ones I knew, I had little doubt that many other men had fought for the shogun and been wounded or killed. And instead of staying to support his army, he'd abandoned them to their fate and been the first to run to safety in Edo? It was awful.
慶喜公が俺たちを捨てて逃げた。
上には上の事情があるってことだろう。俺たちは俺たちで後の世に恥じねえ戦をすりゃいいだけのことだ。
そうですね。
He nodded, his face as placid as ever, but in his eyes I could see defeat and despair. We need to begin preparing for our return to Edo, but all of the warriors seemed dejected, slumped by the heaviness of our defeat. Saito-san, of course, wasn't safe from this dejection. Saito-san. I stopped myself for a second, but decided to approach him. However, he kept his eyes fixed on his tatami mat, not even acknowledging me. Saito-san. I called out to him once more, and all of a sudden, he snapped out of his concentration, and he shot a glance towards me.
すまない。考え事をしていた。先ほど副長が言っていた通り、上には上の事情が、自分たちには自分たちのすべきことがある。まず負傷者の状況を確認しよう。救護の手が足りていないはずだ。
Saito-san didn't seem to believe his own words, and his tone lacked any luster or emotion. You couldn't really blame him, though. He and the other Shinsengumi captains had risked their lives to uphold the shogunate flag in battle, and then Lord Yoshinobu just gave up. To think our Supreme Commander could even think to abandon his men and his army.
何をしている？ここには怪我人が大勢運び込まれている。医学の心得のあるあんたが行けば助けになるはずだ。見に行ってくれ。
Saito-san seemed eager for me to leave, but I just stood there, looking back at him, and instead of leaving, I asked him a question. Saito-san, what's going to happen to the Shinsengumi?
どうなるとは。
Saito-san was clearly annoyed, throwing another question at me. Seeing the coldness of his response made me flinch a little. But I thought it was an important question to ask, so I did what I thought was necessary to help my anxieties. Lord Yoshinobu has abandoned us, right? So if we follow him back to Edo, what will happen then? Does his retreat mean that the Shogunate has no further plans to fight against the Sacho troops?
まだそうなると決まったわけではなかろう。もしかすると江戸で力を蓄え再戦の機会を伺うつもりなのかもしれん。俺たちが気をもんでも仕方あるまい。
But
先ほども言ったが、ここには怪我人が数多く運び込まれている。差し当たって必要なのは怪我人の船への護送、そして江戸への帰還の準備だ。助けを必要としている者がいて、俺たちには彼らを助ける力がある。余計なことに気を取られている場合ではない。
His words came at me quickly and aggressively, and it made me think something was off. Even when he seemed agitated or things were hectic, Saito-san always found time to speak with me or answer my questions. But today he was completely flippant, looking as though he were trying to avoid talking to me altogether. How should I answer? I understand. I understand. I will help Saito-san. There was so much to worry about, but now wasn't the time to stress about it. Our tasks were beginning to pile up and many people were depending on us. Then, I shouldn't be overly concerned about what could be and just focus on the present.
その意気だ。では行くぞ。
His tone seemed to perk up even just a tad, and he bowed his head. When I looked at Saito-san's back, his posture seemed so broken. I stopped and called out for him. Ever since I lost contact with my father, I felt so lonely and full of worry. But I thought that my worry would do me no good, so I made the decision to come to Kyo myself to search for him. So I may not know exactly what you're feeling, or how you're dealing with those feelings, but in the end, I think what's important is to trust those feelings and act on them. Saito-san stopped in his tracks, and he seemed to twitch a bit. Soon he turned around to face me. Just a second ago, his eyes seemed dead, but it appears they have been reignited with purpose. He looked at me sternly.
行くぞ。
His words were curt, but it felt like a sense of determination had returned to Saito-san. As the two of us were leaving the castle, he turned around once more, sadness resting in his face. Are you all right? I asked him softly, but he gave me no answer. After a pause, he wiped the cold sweat from his brow, and he looked into my eyes.
問題ない。行くぞ。
His voice was resolute. Being out in the sun as a fury, from what I had heard, was quite painful. If you start feeling sick, then maybe you should rest until evening? I made a timid suggestion, but Saito-san quietly looked back at me and muttered,
先ほどのあんたの言葉で目が覚めた。
The subtleness of his statement caught me off guard, and I stared confused at him. He turned to face his feet, and his tone seemed almost self-deprecating.
たとえ慶喜公がどのような行動を取ろうと、我々が主君を見捨てていいということにはならない。俺は一体何を迷っていたのか。
Saito-san looked at me sheepishly, as if he were embarrassed by his own doubts earlier. Seeing his reaction made me realize something. All this time, Saito-san worked hard to let his doubts and worries never get the best of him. But I wasn't the only one who felt those doubts. Saito-san, this whole time, was also anxious. I mean, he never showed any signs of worry when he was ordered to spy on the guard or when he drank the water of life. In my heart, somehow, I had just assumed that he was impervious to worry, and that he always got the better of his emotions. Then he looked longingly into my eyes.
幕府が今後どうなるのか、そして我々新選組が何を信じるのかはまだ分かっていない。だがそれもすべて江戸に戻ってからのこと。我々の行く末はこれからだ。だからあんたの不安はわかるが、今は考える必要はない。今は自分たちのすべきことをなし、そして江戸を目指す。いいな。
Saito-san turned back around to make his way to the dock, but his aura had completely changed. If I had done anything to improve Saito-san's mood, then nothing could make me happier. I was thrilled that even just once that I was able to give back to Saito-san. I know that Saito-san and the Shinsengumi will be able to find their purpose as we return to Edo. But when we return to Edo, what awaits me? The whole reason I left Edo was for the purpose of finding my father. Later that night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. Tomorrow, the men of the Shinsengumi would be on their way aboard a ship to Edo. But what was to become of me? There were rumors floating around that my father was siding with the Sacho troops, and now to top it off, he was with Kazuma. I'm sure this was what Saito-san had reported to Hijikata-san when they spoke together. So technically, the Shinsengumi no longer had any obligation to look after me. I was running through all those thoughts when I heard footsteps from outside my room. I wonder who it could be at this hour. Softly, I slid my door open to take a quick peek and see whom it was.
雪村、まだ起きていたのか。
Saito-san!
寝不足での船旅は過酷だ。少しでも体を休めておくに越したことはない。
I know that, but when we return to Edo, all of you will be on standby for the next battle, right?
そうだ。
I felt nervous speaking, especially with what I'd wanted to say next, but... So, am I not allowed to come along with you guys?
なんだと?
I know I'm not really of much use on the battlefield, and I can barely protect myself. Well, especially if we're up against Kazuma, then I stand no chance of protecting myself. And I know that the reason you let me stay with you all was because I was just looking for my father. So, yeah. There's nothing really keeping you guys responsible for me anymore. Does that make me a burden?
戦いに関してはその通りだろうな。あんた自身が一番よくわかっているだろう。
His words were a lot harsher than I anticipated, and I could only hang my head. He was right. All I'd ever be was a burden if I couldn't fight, but still insisted to be by their side.
鳥羽伏見の戦であんたも実感したはずだ。これからの戦は今までのものとは違う。今日隣にいた者が明日にはムクロへと変わる。そんな日が続くに違いない。それでも我々は武士として命果てるまで戦い抜く覚悟があるが、あんたは元来こちら側の人間ではない。戦いの中に身を置く理由などないはずだ。
Hearing Saito-san's words made me realize that, even if it hurts to say it, he puts my safety above almost anything. Saito-san wasn't necessarily the best person with words, but it still made my heart warm to hear it. I do have a reason, though. You saved my life, Saito-san, so I want to pay you back.
我々の都合でしたことだ。恩義に感じる必要はどこにもない。
That's not a good enough excuse. Would you be satisfied hearing it from my side if I had told you the same thing? Saito-san turned away, refusing to look at me as if he were dealing with a petulant child from which he could not wait to leave. Eventually.
失礼。
Saito-san reached for the kodachi on my hips. No, it's just hip. And without a word, took it into his hands, sheathed. He gripped my kodachi tightly.
先ほども言ったが、我々と共に戦いの中に身を置くことになれば、いつ命を落とすかわからん。それでも我々についてくると、そういうのだな。
Saito-san looked into my eyes intently, gazing towards me with a quiet seriousness, and I gave a huge nod.
ならばこの木立を取れ。あんたにその覚悟があるのなら、命を落とすだけの理由があるというのならばな。
Saito suddenly handed me back the kodachi, watching my movements as if he was still testing me. His eyes glimmered against the light, and he stared back at me while I gulped nervously.
だが忘れるな。この木立を取った瞬間から、お前をもう客人としては扱わぬ。二度と引き返せぬ道に足を踏み入れることになるのだぞ。
His eyes were stern, and they were staring at me with such intensity that I couldn't breathe. But I asked to stay, keeping all of this in mind. With this newfound resolve, I reached for my kodachi, and Saito-san smiled faintly.
お前の覚悟、しかと見定めた。もう江戸へ帰れなどとは言わん。どこまででもついてこい。
はい。Although his expectations for me were huge, I felt warm from his words and I loosened up. During the 4 years in which Shinsengumi had looked after me, I couldn't ever shake the thought of feeling like an outsider. But now, for the first time, I finally felt like I've been accepted as one of them. I will follow the Shinsengumi wherever you guys go, and I'll be by your side the whole time, Saito-san. No matter what happens in the future, I have faith in everyone, including you, Saito-san.
そうか。
He kept his response brief. But I could see the smile forming on Saito-san's lips. I wondered if he was even a little happy to hear that I was going to join him. I'm sure we will be facing the Satsucho and Kazuma when we return to... when we return to Edo. God damn it. Why are there so many mistakes in this route? What? There's like specific mistakes of repeating words. What? I'm sure we'll be facing the Satsucho and even Kazuma when we return to Edo, but I felt like as long as I'm with Saito, I'll be alright. I had a mysterious confidence well up in my heart, and I smiled back. Alright. I already know how this route ends. I know how this... the second part ends anyway, because I just did it recently. This one reminded me that... there were some things that I did remember about this part, and... I like this route. And it's giving me ideas for Haruka as well. It had my favorite trope, which is the whole fever thing. The goodbye was really cute as well. When he left to join the guard. And the snow bunny, absolutely fucking cute. But overall, this route is, at least this half, I would say, is as stoic as Saito is. Which is probably the most different of all the routes. Like, it fits Saito's personality to a T. What else can I say? I don't know. It's Saito! It's Saito. What can I say about Saito? Also, hi, Carrot House again. I love Yellowtail is also a name. But Carrot House, used for the voice recording. I wonder if they did the original one? I don't know. Because I know in this game, they re-recorded either all of the lines or some of the lines, because there's a difference in quality when you go play the original game. Like, they sound more muffled, or at least they sounded more muffled to me when I playtested it. When I got it working, anyway. But now we're gonna go on our way to Edo next time. Alright. Ending bit. We're still not done, by the way. January 1868. The Battle of Toba-Fushimi ended with the Satsucho victorious. As the shogunate troops retreated, the Shinsengumi headed towards Edo. 4 years ago, I came to Kyo all by myself in search for my father, and met the Shinsengumi. I'm going to leave the city of Kyo, where I made fond memories with the Shinsengumi. Despite the defeat, his resolve didn't waver, and I have chosen to walk alongside him. We are going to head to Edo, without knowing what fate awaits us. One more bit, and it's the DLC. Fade faster. Saito! $1865, so this is Temple. Yes? Tell me I'm right. Maybe? I don't know, I can't tell. During one afternoon, as the air was filling with the scent of a new spring season... Oh, never mind! Okay, this is before the temple, alright. I found myself cleaning in front of the gate. Oh, hello, Saito-san. Are you heading out?
夕飯の買い物だ。すぐに戻る。
You're going by yourself?
他の者は体調を崩していて同行できぬとのことだ。
They're sick. Supposedly, some of the other warriors had spent another late night in Shimabara partying. Why does this not surprise me at all? So by ill, Saito-san probably meant to say they were suffering a serious hangover. But I couldn't help but think it must be a hassle for Saito-san to try and buy, let alone carry the dinner ingredients for all of the men. Saito-san, would you mind if I tag along?
あんたが掃除の途中だろ。
I'm actually almost finished. If you could just give me a few seconds. Give me a second. Or would I just be inconveniencing you if I joined you? Saito-san turned to the side, absent-mindedly stroking his chin as he thought to himself.
いや、そんなことはない。そこまで言うのならば、よろしく頼む。
Okay, can you wait here? I'm going to tell Hichikata-san that I'm going to be running errands with you.
買い物はこれで全部だな。それでは豚書に戻るとするか。
Hold on a moment, Saito-san. Look, they're selling tofu.
何?
You like tofu, right, Saito-san? We're here, so we might as well get some. Besides, we still have some money left over.
だが今日の献立に豆腐は含まれていないはずだが。
Well, we can put some of the tofu in the miso soup, and the vegetables we brought for the soup can be put into another dish. So if we do that, we'll have an extra side dish. And I'm sure the warriors will be happy.
なるほど。確かにそうかもしれんな。ではあんたの案を取ろう。
Great. Mind waiting for a second? I'm going to ask the clerk if there are any specials he can give us.
承知した。頼んだぞ、雪村。
I'll take it from here. Listen, Saito loves tofu. Like, really loves tofu. Wow, it was even cheaper than I thought. Let's head back.
そうだな。では行くことにするか。それにしても、あんたは何故俺の好物を知っているのだ。話した覚えはないが。
Huh? Well... Every time there's tofu on the menu, I notice that you always seem to smile more, Saito-san.
嬉しそうな、だと。剣を志す者として、できるだけ内心を表に出さぬよう努めているつもりなのだが、俺もまだまだ修行が足りんということだな。
God damn it, Saito. Oh, it's not like that. I hadn't meant anything by it, but... It seems like Saito-san is even more of a serious person than I could have thought.
急ぐぞ。この後夕飯の支度をせねばならんのだからな。大使たちも待ちわびているはずだ。
Oh, right. So, let's get started. I'm gonna start peeling the vegetables.
あとは俺がするから、あんたは部屋に戻っている。と言いたいところだが。それでは明日の朝になっても終わりそうにないな。よろしく頼む、雪村。
Sure.
ではまず、このカゴの中の野菜から。
Saito began handing me the freshly washed vegetables when... Oh. As I reached my hand over to grab them, Saito-san's hand and mine tenderly touched. I'm so sorry,
いや、こちらこそすまない。すぐに拾おう。
No, I'm the one that's sorry. We can't stop apologizing to each other. After we exchanged another round of apologetic stammering, we continued to prepare dinner in a relatively awkward silence. As the food we had prepared was well received by all of the men during dinner time, I saw Saito-san smirk as he sipped on his tofu miso soup happily, and it brought a warmth to my heart that made me smile in return. Alright. Now that's it. No art stream or Splatoon 3 stream tonight, but tomorrow we're going to continue in Anoblossom with Saito's route. So with that, at 3 p.m. by the way, so with that, drink water, have a good night or day, don't die because you don't drink water, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.